Welcome to One the Other Way, a podcast about your journey and finances. I'm your host, James, and in today's episode, we're talking about employee benefits. This is actually the second episode on employee benefits, so we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Welcome to One the Other Way, a podcast about your journey and finances. I'm your host, James, and today we have Peggy with us from Finances for Real Life. She's an advisor. And today we're talking about HSAs, HRAs, and FSAs. So, Peggy, you
All
want to say
right.
hi?
Hi. Thanks for joining us.
So, we had a previous podcast about employee benefits, and this is kind of a part two, just kind of going into the second step of, we talked about the 401k, the 403b. Now let's talk about the healthcare side of things when you have employer provided healthcare insurance. So let's, I guess, start with HSAs because I feel like that's the one that I hear of the most. I actually, before I got into this job, I had never actually heard of the term FSA. And I know there are some distinct differences, but let's just start with the one that I feel like, at least on my end, I thought this was the most common thing was an HSA. So what is an HSA?
So an HSA is a health savings arrangement, I believe. And it's actually a great benefit. HSAs, HRAs, and FSAs, there are a lot of requirements, regulatory requirements as far as things that make you qualify to be able to have these accounts. And HSAs are obviously one of those. And they're a great benefit for you if you have a high deductible healthcare plan at work or even on your own. You can put money away, a specific amount of money that's regulated by the government each year. It goes into the account tax deferred, so you don't pay tax on it in this year. And as long as you use it for medical expenses, you don't pay tax on it ever. So as you can see, this is a huge benefit.
That sounds like you can keep this basically through retirement too.
Yes. So there's a lot of great advantages to it. You can invest the money, and so then the money grows, and it goes with you from employer to employer as long as you maintain eligibility. You can keep putting the annual maximums in there, and it stays with you forever. So it's a great benefit. I would recommend that if your employer has one and you can do it, talk to your HR people about it for sure.
Well, before we go into comparisons with other things, you had mentioned eligibility, and I think that's something we should touch on because we'll hit eligibility for each one of them. But I guess with HSA, how do you qualify? Do you have
Well,
to have a high deductible?
you do. And high deductible, I should know this, but I'm not 100% sure that they haven't raised it, but it used to be $1,500 a year. If you had a medical plan that had a $1,500 a year deductible, then you were allowed to have an HSA account.
Mm-hmm.
So there are other requirements that you have to have as well. And it's very much like all the different accounts that have tax benefits. There's always going to be some type of requirement. The big one here is the deductible. And your employer, what if they offer that type of a plan. And
so if you were looking at your employer's healthcare plan offerings, there would be, and from my experience, I had, a job where we had a high deductible plan. We had like a regular, not high deductible, but also not high premium, kind of in the middle road. And then we had like a higher premium plan too. Just for those who don't know, can you quickly hit on what a deductible and a premium is, just so people could understand that?
Okay, so premiums are the amount that you pay to be covered by the insurance company.
Okay.
So that's and your employer is different. Some employers pay all the premium, some of them pay the premium just for the employee, and then you have to pay the premium for your spouse and children. So that's going to depend on whatever your benefits are in your insurance. So that's the premium. Deductibles are amounts that you have to pay before the insurance pays.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a deductible that is $1,500 or $2,000, then you have to pay that every year prior to the insurance company paying for anything.
Mm-hmm.
So HSAs, just, we should probably mention also that you put money into it every year. ideally, this money, you save it. It could become a huge tool for you in the future and into your retirement. But you do have the ability to use the money in the current year to pay for your medical expenses. So
Mm,
there are a huge list of items that are covered by your HSA. You can't just use it for anything, but there's a very large list, and it's in the IRS. So you can go to the irs.gov and find out what are eligible expenses for all of these different types of HSA, FSA, HRA.
hmm.
So
So, so what I'm hearing too, though, is that it's a good way to use the HSA is to help cover the deductible that since it's so high,
well, I
you could.
wouldn't say that, no.
No, you
I
wouldn't.
mean,
Okay.
you can use it for that reason. That's the purpose. And I think that originally how they started it. But if you're putting money in there, you're not paying tax on it this year, and you have the ability to pay for your medical expenses as they occur out of your regular cash flow, then, depending on your particular situation, that might be the best way to go, because you can put this money away and let it grow and invest it, and it continues to grow without paying tax until, your future. And if you use it for medical expenses in your future, you don't pay tax on it then either. So it actually can become a huge part of your overall savings for
Hmm.
retirement.
So in retirement, say you don't have a high deductible plan, can you still use your HSA that you have accumulated?
You may use it, it's your money. So you may
Hmm.
use it for qualified expenses.
Okay.
And actually, in retirement for an HSA, you may use it for other expenses, but then you must pay tax on it at regular income
Hmm.
rates. So then it becomes ordinary income if you use it for something other than medical.
Okay.
But, as the way life is, as you age, you're going to have more and more medical expenses. I mean, we hope not, but it's just kind of the facts, right? So using it for your medical expenses is really the best choice.
Great.
So that's
Great. And
HSAs.
yeah, so let's kind of
So,
move into,
yeah.
I guess, let's move into FSA because that's the second one I've heard of the most, and then
Mhm.
HRA is the one that I
Right.
feel like is
So,
not as talked about.
right. Well, an FSA is a flexible spending account arrangement. And it is a little bit different in that that money expires at the end of every year. So you can put money into it if that's a benefit of your employer. You could put money into this account and you don't pay tax on it. You can use it for your medical expenses. Again, there's a list of qualified, acceptable medical expenses. And then you don't pay tax on it, but it's a use it or lose it kind of thing. You put the money in there, at the end of the year it expires. So if you don't use it, it goes away. But then employers can give you an extension for 2 or I think until March 15th. But again, that money does not stay there forever.
Mhm.
And there's another one for FSA also that could be used for dependent care. And so that has a whole nother set of rules, but you can use it to pay for childcare if there's an FSA. So, I mean, also a good tax, it helps you not to have to pay the tax. If you're already going to have expenses for childcare, right? Now you don't have to pay tax on that money and then send it out. So that's a huge benefit. And the medical one, if they don't have an HSA or you don't have a high deductible plan, but you know, it is a good benefit. So your eligibility for an FSA is going to be based on your employer's plan. So you look through the documents that you get when you're hired and talk to your HR people about it.
Great. So I guess then we can go more into HRA next, which is the third, but I feel like less known option. At least I mean, my last job that I had, I never saw anything about an HRA, but I
Yeah,
have heard of
HRA
them in
is
other jobs.
yeah, HRA is a little bit different. I didn't know about HRAs until recently either. And this one's different because the employer actually owns the money. You do not own the
Mm,
money. The employer funds it and the employer owns the money. So when you leave, you do not get the money. It doesn't stay with you. It's controlled by the employer. You can use the money to, in some cases, to pay for your premiums on your health insurance, which is not, you cannot do that with an HSA until you get to Medicare age.
mm,
So you can use your HSA to pay your Medicare premiums, but you cannot use it in the current year to pay your premiums. So you can do that with an HRA depending on your employer's plan again. And that's the biggest difference there is it's controlled by the employer. The employer owns the money. And when you leave that job, the money does not go with you. I mean, that's a
And
huge difference.
HRA stands for Health Reimbursement Account or
Arrangement.
Arrangement.
Yes. Arrangement. Health reimbursement arrangement. And that is basically it's an arrangement between you and your employer. And there's regulatory things that your employer has to follow with the plan. But again, that's going to be outlined for you in your plan documents with your employer. So, I mean, basically, those are the main differences, right? So, HSA, you own the money, you put the money in. There is some possibilities that your employer puts in some of the money, but you own it. And it goes with you when you leave to another job. You can invest the money grows. As long as you use it for medical expenses, you don't pay tax on it. FSAs, they don't go with you. At the end of each year, the money goes away. So it's a use it or lose it. It's based on this year. You put the money in this year, you use the money this year. And then HRAs, the employer owns the money, puts the money in, and you don't get to take it with you when you go. But you can use it in some cases to pay for your medical premiums. So each one basically has a different benefit to you. They're all beneficial. I would really recommend that you look into whatever is offered by your employer. I'm a big advocate for employer benefits, making sure that you're taking advantage of them. These different types of accounts have, benefits that you get money from your employer sometimes. You get tax deferred. You have something that you're building for the future, perhaps. So all of these accounts are good, but really it's going to depend on your situation, what you can afford, what type of health insurance you have, what your employer offers. So I would just highly recommend that you look into them and, know about them and see if they're going to work for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Peggy, for walking us through these employee benefits. If you have any questions, please follow up with us at financesforlife.com. You can schedule a consultation with Peggy. Please stay tuned for future episodes. We release them every 2 weeks, and we look forward to being on this journey with you. Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advice offered through Finances for Real Life, a registered investment advisor and separate entity from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.